welcome to the Roundtable 2. This is the topic which is focusing on the digital humanities and infrastructure on digital humanities. I'm very happy to have the participants here, which I like them to say some words of themselves, so introduce themselves. I'd like to start with Marta.
Yes, hi. I'm a backend developer at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And yes, my name is Marta Palandri, and I work mainly with the rest of my team, with the development team, for a project called, or an ensemble projects called Portfolio and Showroom. Basically, we take care of, it's basically an open source solution in order to organize and exhibit our work and research, or everybody's work and research. And I've just been there for a year. So actually almost to the day, I've been working there for a year. And yes, we've been working on the features, and we work a lot with APIs. And I've worked a lot with APIs in the past as well. And while I'm a developer, I also have a background in the humanities. So it is kind of an interest of mine to mix the two, both code and the humanities.
Thank you very much, Marta. Then I will ask Arianna.
Hi, hello. Thank you for inviting me to this roundtable. My name is Arianna Chula, and I am currently acting director and senior research software analyst at King's Digital Lab, which is a research software engineering lab within the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at King's College London in the UK. So as an analyst, my main role is basically to be a first point of contact for partners that work with us on several digital humanities, cultural heritage related projects. So these might be historians, academics of different kinds, within King's, outside King's, but also partners in libraries, archives, museums, and increasingly also a little bit of creative industries and commercial partners as well. Currently, as an acting director, our director became a professor and left the lab in September. We don't have yet a new director, so my role is basically to coordinate the lab a little bit. I can say more about the specific project we work on. We have around, maybe right now, around 150 projects that we host. We inherited a lot of those from previous iteration of the lab in the form, for example, of the Department of Digital Humanities, and before then the Center for Humanities Computing at King's. We obviously use APIs in this project a lot, both within the project themselves. So for example, to feed interfaces for those projects, but also we use APIs of other systems and tools to get data. For example, I can mention later if it's of interest, things like Wikidata and things like that. But increasingly, there is a potential to do more with this. So I hope we will be able to discuss that later on.
Thank you very much. Then I like to ask Franco.
Hi, I'm Franco Nicolucci, and I ended my academic career 8 years ago after working for 40 years in the university. And since then, I have been involved with a number of large-scale projects concerning cultural heritage, and especially archaeology. So I've been working in digital archaeology since the end of the last century. So I think that here, I will listen to Elisabetta, but I think that here I may somehow represent the user's voice. Although my background is technological, I have a very ancient degree in mathematics. And since then I have worked on applications, including APIs and developing usable software. But the issues are not just in software. I think that there are more social issues and more, we have to include in the discussion also a perspective on how people will apply this kind of developments and if they are suitable for moving a significant step forward in the digitization of the whole sector.
I'm Elisabetta Lazzaro. I'm a professor of economics and management of the creative industries at the Business School for the Creative Industries at the University for the Creative Arts in England and UK. Happy to see that most of the participants to this roundtable are Italian, like myself. So my background is in the social sciences and the arts. Being myself a cultural economist, and I've been working in my research on digitization applied to different sectors of the CCI, starting with cultural heritage, but also the fine arts and the art market, the performing arts, and also processes and infrastructures of financing creative professionals and creative organizations. And this has been done through different projects at national, on a national scale, as well as European and international scales. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Rahman. I work at the University of Vienna. There I'm responsible for the infrastructure for data preservation from research data. In this case, we build infrastructure also for file-based preservation, like a repository. This repository is called PHAIDRA, and we are at our university interdisciplinary, but we have also a big focus on humanities. And what I've seen, there's with working with data, the digital data, a new way of to see humanities, which also we call it digital humanities. And the question is also for me from an infrastructure provider is how does the digital humanities can work with APIs, with the API economy, and what are the needs, what are the different perspectives, also the user perspective, what we also already heard, and I think we have great panelists today. I like to then ask the first question, what does this mean with the API and this digitalization now for the humanities? Maybe I like to start with Franco, because he already had asked about the user perspective in his introduction. I would like to start with you, Franco.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would start from some very general considerations. A few days ago, the European Commission issued, as you perhaps know, a recommendation on the digitization of cultural heritage in Europe. This is a significant step forward in the politics and in the strategy of the Commission. And there is also this push to start what they call a digital decade. So the digital aspects are very strongly fostered by politicians. And there are great expectations that the software, including APIs, but also other aspects like artificial intelligence and so on, can solve many of the issues concerning correct data management, particularly for use. What is, in my opinion, missing, to make it short, is a clear analysis of the psychological aspects of heritage professionals. I think that it is given for granted that they will be very happy to use that, and they will be prepared to use that. I think that if we do not parallel development of software and APIs in particular, with a upskilling of the people working in cultural heritage, not only upskilling, but also a change of mentality. What is nowadays widely called the digital transformation, which is, first of all, in my opinion, digital transformation of people, but it's also digital transformation of institutions and the way they work, and ultimately the digital transformation of the humanities methodology. We can develop very good APIs, very good software, but it will have a very down to not only the products the technology is producing, but also the customers, the prospective customers, because otherwise you have something which is very fast, very efficient, very effective, very good, you know, in one word, but is not appreciated by the people who should be the first users of this.
So the customers and the user who is using the software is very essential, and I think this also brings us closer to the process of the development. And then I like to ask Martha next, as a developer and also with the background of humanities. Do you think this background of humanities helps you in producing the software, in designing the software for the customers closer, for the users?
I would say yes. And I think this is kind of an important point that we're making, because I do realize that in my case, for example, I have a background, a university background in the humanities, and then I moved on to programming in this case, so software development. And I do realize that being sort of in the middle allows me to understand a lot of things that are not immediately obvious to what we could assume to be the customers or the primary users of a service like an API. And having this knowledge definitely helps me to be able to think about that first, because I was there once and now I'm not there anymore, but it's not something you really forget. But this kind of puts a spotlight on the fact that it doesn't seem, at least to me, a problem that is very seriously addressed. This accessibility, not only when it comes to API structure and methodologies, but also the tools for those people, let's say, technical enough to do a lot of it manually. So I see a lot of a bit of a lack of tools that could be more accessible to whoever is not directly involved on either side of the either programming or, you know, cultural context and research and so on.
Thank you. That's I think you addressed with the lack of the tools and the tools we are using. So are there really, do we have the right tools in place, or do we have do we need more tools? I like to ask this also to Elisabetta. She's also seeing the process of the whole digitalization, working with different on digitalization and different perspective. What do you think about the tools? Do we have enough tools? Do we have right tools?
Well, thank you for your question. My background, as I mentioned, is not technological. I'm not I don't have a particular IT background, so I'm mostly interested in the different applications that can derive from digitization applied to the different CCI sectors. So, for instance, well, to respond to your question, depends on the tools. Because similarly to the great variety that we have in the CCI, we have also a great variety of tools in the digitization applied to the CCI. So from my perspective, I'm rather interested in how these tools can foster, support, for instance, the business models the different creative organizations and professionals work with. So how this business model can be improved.
Mm-hmm. So really also to have not only the right tools, also the right business model, how to improve, how this all fits together and how this all come them together and bring the whole ecosystem. So that I like to talk about ecosystems because that you see that the works are not only in place, that the work should also fit together. And I think Ariana, you also mentioned in your introduction that you're working with APIs and you have these also a little bit both perspective on development and humanities. How do you see this?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to add, first of all, to what Franco said about expertise, so the importance of the human element. And definitely in whatever kind of tools we are creating, the human expertise is very important. So when we're talking about sustaining infrastructure, that expertise is crucial. So for example, I'm not saying this is the model, but one model that we have at KDL, the King's Digital Lab, is to think of the research software engineer as a very holistic kind of profile. So we have obviously developers with an engineering background, but we also have analysts that typically have also experience in one of the disciplines of the humanities was related to cultural heritage. And then they're able to bridge in a way the language, if you like, of technology with the language of the humanities, talking in very, very superficial terms. And then we have designers. So third element, very important that Elisabetta and others also mentioned, and Martha as well. So the user perspective, the user-centered design, and in general, the design leading the development of those tools and infrastructure. One additional thing I wanted to mention, though, is that unfortunately, if we're talking about the opportunities that are there, that I think that maybe we're not able to grasp entirely yet, is the fact that funding and research are still very much focused on the single projects and single project ideas rather than thinking in infrastructural terms. So more often than not, it is indeed left to the expertise of those that work across project to identify possibilities of, for example, thinking of API or microservices or modules that can work across projects and bringing in those opportunities, for example, in connecting cultural heritage and higher education and research and creative industries, as Elisabetta was mentioning. So those are, I think I see, there are a lot of potentials, but there are also still a lot of challenges, I think, to make that bridge. I hope I address a little bit of that question, Raman.
Yes, thank you. You bring in a very good perspective to see this also from a bigger scope, that the API is connecting also infrastructure, but the funding is very much focused on projects. And when we have this digitalization project where we are doing a massive amount of analog data, which are then being digitalized, and then in another project, all this material should be used. And so APIs can work, but also the funding structure should be interested, looked also in this, how the funding can work with this. And maybe this brings us to the next question. So how does this new way of thinking with the data, or also in this thinking more in infrastructure, affect the working with the data and the culture in the digital humanities? How does this shift? How does this change? Maybe Ariana, you can add something to this because you started with this topic.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, definitely, as I said, there is in a way the focus on, for example, data API, so sharing data, opens up the idea of the single project, and in a way that, if you like, quite isolating perspective on silos project towards a more interconnected ecosystem. Now here, as Frank also mentioned, there are issues obviously around data ownership, around, for example, curation and cleaning of those data and so on. But there are also really interesting examples of things that do work. One example I wanted to mention, which is quite self-evident, is, for example, the adoption of the triple IF as a standard to share, I'm going to describe it in very simple terms, but images. So, for example, more and more cultural heritage institutions now mint their own images and make available the API to access those images. So in our project, that might be about the scholarly analysis or discussion of some of these cultural heritage objects, we can use and view, showcase and display the images that are minted by those institutions without hosting the images ourselves. So if you like, the annotation layers around those images are provided by the single projects, which might have their own single perspective and interpretations, but the actual data in this case come from somewhere else. So that's a very simple example of something that works. And I'm not sure whether for the roundtable you will actually share the any links, but I can add an example of the Shakespeare in the Royal Collection project that does exactly that. So the Royal Collection Trust is a partner in the project, and they do have, obviously they host the actual collections, they digitize, they have the images online, and then they make them available using this standard. And we are then able to view in our web interface those images and the associated material and information that comes from this specific project. So that's a very simple example. There are, if you like, some that are a little bit more complex, and they require also, in terms of technical expertise, further knowledge. An example is the link open data paradigm. I don't know how much you want to me to go into details for that, but for example, another project where we experimented a little bit with that via our research fellow, John Bradley, was for the DPRR project, which is the Roman Republic project. I'm going to add a link here as well, where the information about the people of the Roman Republic that were analyzed by the project partners is made available also as linked open data that can be queried by external applications. So in this specific case, for example, what was interesting is that students in classics in a totally different university than ours reused those data to create something very different, which I think was about the history of theater, and now they could then visualize the characters in those plays. So very different use. So I hope this gives an idea of some of the examples of some of the things that could be done.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for the links. We will then make also the links in some way available, maybe on the website, or write some article afterwards. So these are very nice links you shared with us. And you mentioned this also, having this data in different kind of infrastructure linked with over APIs, so you can use it then on a technical way. So like to ask Marta, what is it from a technical perspective, from a perspective of a developer, playing around with so much data and working with this API? Is this now confusing also, or because you have different standards, or it brings it more new challenges? What do you think about this way of working also as a developer?
Thank you. This is quite an interesting question, especially because it's something that in the past I found myself thinking about a lot and struggling with a lot, because maybe it's not much about creating. So maybe in my case, creating APIs with too much data, but it's more about a common lack of standards. Of course, there have been some efforts, but it happens that there is kind of a lack of standards. Therefore, whenever there's not an accurate amount of documentation, or any documentation at all, which is quite frequent, it could be kind of an impediment to getting the sort of data you want. And yes, it can get very confusing, and it can get very problematic, of course, because it happened to me a few times where I could find some really great APIs on paper, but then the lack of documentation would make it quite hard to use them the way I wanted. I think in general, this is a technical detail, but I do think that in general, it happens more often than not, at least in my experience, that a lot of APIs are built by developers whose main project is not building the APIs necessarily, and it's even less to write the documentation. So the results are what you can expect considering that. And I do think it's also kind of not taken too seriously, while it should be, as this is a way to access this kind of enormous resources that could be very helpful, and is kind of blocked in this way.
Mm. Yes, I think this is really at the time in that we are now having a lot of new things, that the lack of documentation makes it really hard. And I think the same happens also from the perspective of the user, then getting with not very good documented software, and also very I will call it raw kind of software. It's not that user friendly, and so I like to ask Elisabetta, how is it to work with from a user perspective, so not with these deep technology to be deep inside with a lot of different tools, and this kind of very sometimes really raw, I think it's raw kind of software.
Well, as it has been already advanced during this roundtable, the user perspective refers to a multiplicity of roles and expertise in dealing with these tools. And a very important thing is that notwithstanding the literacy, the different levels of literacy anybody can have, the way to go is to include this kind of literacy in traditional literacy systems like writing, reading. So everybody needs to be more familiar with this kind of tools and the way they work, and the way to operate them also in a more active way rather than just a passive way.
Mm-hmm. So you see it also that it's necessary, the literacy, so to understanding the new tools and work with the new tools, and also understand how this works, and in which kind the things are working. It's important. So I like to ask then, Franco, additional to this, you have a long tradition of working with data in your active research career. Does this shift with the digital really makes it so much harder, so much a big change also for the humanities itself, that it's necessary to learn this kind of new literature?
Well, you know, availability of tools is always creating an interest for them. In my experience, I started a large-scale project on archaeological data 8 years ago, and things have changed a lot in the target community, archaeologists. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we made a survey, and only between 20 and 30% thought that this was useful to their work. So it seemed to be more, you know, a small group interested in this kind of things, and well, it was fashionable. Okay, we made the same survey recently, and 75% was interested in this, and we use data produced by others. And this also changed their way of carrying out their research work. In short, we will produce virtual research environments where researchers may pick up data from different sources and combine them and reprocess them and then produce results, scientific results, and also more data which will be then fed again into this mechanism. So I think that the availability of good tools, in particular the ones that allow to integrate different kind of software, is a precondition to develop something. For what remains, so for example, the people in museums, curators, or even officers in charge of management, there is a need of assisting them in this upskilling, in this change of mentality. And in a recent proposal I made, which I hope will be successful and funded, the idea was that this kind of work, which mainly concerns valorization of heritage, could be done by creative and cultural industries. They should just change the capital C of creative into a small font C and help and work together with other professionals to develop a common understanding of how the digital transformation may change their everyday work and how this will produce more successful, interesting results, both for them and for the public at large. It could also be an important source of new markets, new jobs, and developing a bridge between two different worlds. Of course, I'm not speaking of Netflix, I'm speaking of small and medium enterprises active in the field of CCIs.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yes, I think you addressed these a really good point, that this common understanding and to bring the people together and find a common understanding of the digitalization and really find new ways of working and even new markets and how we like to work with data in the future. So we are coming to an end, and for this I like to ask you all a short statement in a way, when you now see digital humanities and the API economy with all this different perspective, what we see, what are the biggest wish, or one of the ideas or wish what you have in the future, that infrastructure or infrastructure also in a very broad sense, so also the people working in an environment together is also a kind of infrastructure, because software is nothing without the people who are using the software. What are the big wishes for you in the next years? I like to start with Elisabetta.
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball. This is a rapidly evolving field. I would like to touch upon an aspect that perhaps we haven't dealt with sufficiently, namely the impact of the private sector. I am a strong advocate of the public sector in not only financing these kinds of initiatives, but also in setting the rules of the game, because there are major concerns connected with the development of this field. Take, for instance, security issues, consumer protection, and so forth. However, so this is a very strong role that we should never forget about the public sector to play. On the other hand, we are assisting at a major role played by the private sector because of the huge investments for profit oriented, of course, being put being made in this field.
Yes, thank you.
So mine is a sort of warning message in order to find viable ways of public-private partnerships.
Mm. Thank you. Yes, I think you addressed a very good point. This private-public partnership, it's sometimes not very easy. And I think there's also a lot of things to improve, but I think it's necessary to have this partnership and to find really a good partnership for both. I'd like to ask now Arianna for your view, yes, or your vision for the future.
I think my wish is in a way similar to Elisabetta in the sense that I like to see a world where the human infrastructure was part of the infrastructure and where labs like ours would be more prominent as brokers in a way across sectors, so that a vision of a world where there was more mobility across creative industries, research institutions, cultural heritage professionals, so that we would have that expertise more shared, if you like, but also not necessarily focused only on academic careers, but for example, also on research software engineering careers, additionally possibly opening up to the creative sector, so that those opportunities are harnessed in better way than they are at the moment. That would be my wish. And ideally in the profile of this kind of broker role, I like to see an inclusive set of profiles, not just indeed the technologies understood in a very narrow sense, but the analyst, the designer, and the developer.
Thank you very much. I think yes, I can say also that this is a way how I think is to include all the different expertise from the developers, the designers, and the academic, and also the consumer and the creative economy and so on.
And maybe just to add to that, for me to achieve that, we need not only different kind of programs at the teaching level, but also, as I said before, also different focus in the funding institutions. It's happening more and more, but so that they're directed towards infrastructure in that sense, rather than silos projects.
Yes, it's quite interesting, your view. I'd like to ask now Franco for your vision, for your wish for the future, digital future.
I always thought that it is better to be optimistic and be very often wrong than being pessimistic and be always right. So I go for the optimistic view. Apart from this statement, there are, in my opinion, indicators that on this regard, the situation is evolving well. As I said, I have noticed personally, directly, in several communities an interest for a more and better digitized world, at least as far as their activity is concerned. I would not bother too much about funding. There will be plenty of money. The European Commission has started what they call the digital decade. So for the next 10 years, all activities concerning digitization and APIs, as well as any kind of integrating activity, creating and joining and bridging between projects, communities, developments, and perspectives, in my opinion, is going to be richly, principally funded. So that's not a problem. And the good ideas always are able to find their way to be sustained by something. So I'm pretty confident that if we meet again in 10 years, we will be able to see that the world has gone, at least in this field, in the direction that we all wish. The environmental sensibility, which is now obviously increasing well, it's a matter of fact, but also people is being convinced of this, also supports this kind of activity. So because the digitization has a green side, which must what is in the interest of everybody to develop. So I'm pretty confident. Let's meet again in 10 years. I will be older, but still active and present, but we will have good results, I hope. And I believe.
I think also, I believe also that we are on a good way, and to have this optimistic point of view, it's quite nice. And also, I'd like to ask you, Marta, your view, your vision for the next future, for the next few years.
Well, I agree quite a bit with Adriana and Elizabeth mostly, and my wish is related to that. I think a way to kind of bridge these gaps have to do a lot with literacy when it comes to technical debt, because I see that a lot more could be done in teaching not just the use of tools, but also of basic technology, because I think right now technology in this sense is it seems quite mystic, but it really isn't. And on the other hand, we have a lot of really skilled developers that don't feel maybe like the public sector or research sector when it comes to humanities and so on is that glamorous, as private companies are way more glamorous and more interesting to many. And I would really like to see a better and more interesting focus also on that part of what technology can be used for, because I don't think that's really the case at the moment. And there's a lot of interest in things that could be also very helpful to digital humanities and cultural studies, but most of the interest on the tools has normally to do with anything but cultural studies. So for example, artificial intelligence is all about science of a certain kind, and it's all about private enterprises and so on, while it could be used for so many other things. And sometimes developers just don't know and do not really have the access to how interesting these fields can be also for them, could be also for them.
So the interest of to bring the interest of the humanities more to a broader audience.
Yeah, definitely. To a broader technical audience.
To a broader technical audience, yes, sure. So it was quite a really interesting roundtable we had today. I thank all participants. I enjoyed it really to have so many different views on this topic, and I think there are really a lot of things we can improve, and we are still on a good road. So we are doing a lot of great projects, and I think to bring this project closer together and see it also more from an infrastructural way, and to bring it to a broader audience and to interest more people, also the private sector, I think we can do this, and it's a great thing. Thank you to all. I enjoyed it, and I hope you also enjoyed the roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Having us.
I really look forward to the progress of this conference, and it was very nice to meet new colleagues, and I hope we stay in touch.